This week's passage begins with one of Jesus' holy butts. That was a funny joke. You guys are rude. You guys are rude. This week's passage begins with one of Jesus' holy butts. You have heard it said, but I say to you. There you go, whatever. Jeez, I'm scratching out all my jokes. Jesus has just finished outlining his blessings and woes, or rather, honor and shame, as we reframed it a couple of weeks ago. If you don't remember, there's snow blindness or something happening. If you don't remember, here's a refresher. Honored are you who are poor, who live in encampments, and who gather food from Kerr Street Mission, for you will be filled. Honored are you who have such suffocating mental health struggles that you can barely function, for you will laugh. Honored are you who are written off for proclaiming an upside-down way of the world, where a universal basic income is normalized and celebrated, and billionaires are taxed at 100%. Honored are you when you put aside your reputation to fight for justice in my name. And then in the same breath, shame, Jesus says, to those who are full and rich now, you've more than hit your limit. You're not going to feel great about what comes next. Shame, Jesus says, to those who puff up their chests about being self-made. And shame, says Jesus, to those who are at the top of their game, the top of the popularity list, using money and power and privilege to make life easier and more glamorous for yourself and your friends, while others suffer inequality and injustice. So today's lesson, that was a refresher, today's lesson picks up with the very next word out of Jesus' mouth. And it's as if Jesus knew that it couldn't just be left there. Because of our human proclivity towards self-justification and violence, something more needed to be said just in case anyone thought to misuse or abuse the blessings and the woes. So he put in a caveat, which he begins with the word Allah, in Greek, which translates but. All of this reversal of honor and shame, blessings and woes, haves and have-nots, all of this is part of God's kingdom, but to you I say, love your enemies. All of this is true, but regardless, nevertheless, not so fast, Jesus says. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. To those on the bottom of society who want to use Jesus' words as fuel for a violent rebellion against the oppressive upper class. And to those up top who want to take Jesus' words as rationale to crush the lower class, to prevent any kind of reversal of fortune that would cause them to experience shame. To all of those, Jesus says, no, you may not weaponize my teachings. My message can only be used for love. Love your enemies, do good to them. The author Mark Twain was once asked, don't you have a problem as a Christian with all those bits of the Bible that you don't understand? And he replied, nope, it's the bits that I do understand that give me the problems. Love your enemies, do good to them. And in case you missed it, Jesus drives the point home a few verses later. He says, if you only love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Like, here's your medal. Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Here's your badge. Even sinners do that. Or as one preacher said in his commentary recently, it's easy to love the people you like. It is much harder to love the jerks. But I'm telling you to love the jerks. And then he threw in a call-in back to the book of Exodus saying, because there was a time when you were a jerk and someone loved you. Well, isn't that the uncomfortable truth? We're familiar with the greatest commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind, but what Jesus is commanding in Luke 6 is rightly called the hardest commandment. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. Now, I know what it means to love my kids, my mother, my siblings. I know what it means to love my partner and my dear friends. But how on earth am I expected to love those people who have deeply hurt me in the past, who are at this very moment trying to undermine me and hurt my life through what they say behind my back or how they are treating me? Maybe you can relate. And what about those who have suffered physical abuse as children? Or those of us who have suffered from the abuse of a spouse or partner, or who have been deeply betrayed or abandoned by other people in other ways? How can we change how we think of people we once trusted to care for us? And what about people who are the recipients of hatred simply because of the color of their skin, or their gender presentation, their country of origin, their disability, dialect, or social class? Things they didn't even choose but are simply born into. What does Jesus' command to love your enemies mean in those complex cases? This can really scale up and down, can't it? Enemy is a very broad term. Just turn on the news. From political systems that are causing immeasurable chaos and death, all the way down to the person that you used to call a friend who is spitting malice in your direction. This is the hardest commandment. It's easy to love the people you like. It is much harder to love the jerks, but I'm telling you to love the jerks because there was a time when you were a jerk and someone loved you too. Here's Jesus, literally leveling with us on the plane, eye to eye, holding us firmly but lovingly by the shoulders, telling us straight to our faces, a great reversal is coming and is now here. And the linchpin to the whole thing is this: do not match your enemy's anger or their violence to you. Love your enemy. Okay, not entirely a new concept, I get it. We know this stuff. We know that when we white-knuckle anger and hatred towards others, it eats us up physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. It disconnects us from God and our shared humanity. I get it. In fact, I know it because I've been there. I'm just as human. I am just as fallible as every single one of you. I do not hold any kind of moral superiority. If someone hurts us, the temptation is to hurt them back. Hurt people, hurt people. But Nelson Mandela famously said it best: resentment is like drinking poison and hoping it'll kill your enemy. And let's not forget that we have something that Jesus and his followers didn't have: the internet. Social media. 24-hour news channels. All of these industries that thrive on our anger and hatred, feeding it to us, then monetizing it, polarizing us, cranking up our rage through conspiracies and half-truths and fake news, headlines, and even, my dear, memes. But holding on to that negativity and anger will destroy us. And we will stay imprisoned in the darkness of our minds. We need to be liberated. We are guzzling poison, and we need an antidote. Luckily, Jesus comes through. although we might have to pinch our nose to avoid the taste, because the medicine is in choosing to love our enemy. Ugh. Now let's get something straight. We can love our enemies without condoning their behavior. And we can love our enemies without actually wanting to invite them over for dinner or giving them a big hug at coffee hour. We don't have to do that. Love takes many forms. But what's necessary in loving our enemies is taking a scalpel to their words, not to them, settle down, taking a scalpel to their words and actions and choices, and surgically separating those from their humanity. Rachel, you actually hit on it in the opening prayer, in the prayer of confession, so thank you for that. You can separate the hurtful things from the person. Loving our enemies does not mean we passively accept the harm that they're doing. On the contrary, it means that while we obstruct their death-dealing choices and actions, we take care not to let go of their humanity in the process. And there's a name for this kind of love. I think I put it on a slide. Active Nonviolent Resistance. Saying no to that which is hateful, abusive, and dehumanizing, while also holding out for the humanity and worthiness of the person with whom we are in opposition. In her book, You Can't Kill the Spirit, great title, author Pam McAllister talks about the two hands of active nonviolent resistance. With a hand, we say to one who is angry, or who is an oppressor, or to an unjust system, stop what you're doing. I refuse to honor the role you're choosing to play. I refuse to obey you or cooperate with your demands or perpetuate your malice. I refuse to build the walls, the bombs, or pay for the weapons. With this hand, I will actively interfere with the wrong that you are doing. I want to disrupt that which makes things easy for you at the expense of others. But then with the other hand, we raise it outstretched and open. Maybe with compassion, maybe not, but always outstretched and open. And with this hand we say, I will not let go of your humanity. I will not cast you out of the human race. I have faith that you can make a better choice than you're making now, and I'll be here when you are ready. Like it or not, we are part of one another. Active nonviolent resistance is saying to our opponent, I will not operate with your violence. I will not cooperate, rather, with your violence, injustice, or malice. I will resist it with every fiber of my being, and at the same time, I'm open to you as a human being. Our liberation is connected. That's hard work. That's gospel work. Jesus described this tension thusly, although forgive me for hopping over to Matthew's gospel, since that's the one that you're likely more familiar with. You have heard that it was said, this is in Matthew 5, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but, Jesus, holy buts, but I say to you, if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your coat as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile with them, go with them for 2. Unfortunately, many Christians simply dismiss Jesus' teachings here out of hand as impractical idealism, spineless pacifism. Turn the other cheek has been bled of any real meaning and been, to quote theologian Walter Wink, reduced to a doormat-like quality that has made the Christian way seem cowardly and complicit in the face of injustice. Not a good look. Very bad for the brand. Going the second mile has become a platitude, enjoining us to extend ourselves. To quote Wink again, Jesus' teaching viewed this way, buckle up. He is not gentle. Walter Wink, highly recommend him. Jesus' teaching viewed this way is impractical and masochistic, an invitation to bullies to wipe the floor with their supine Christian victims. Jesus never taught passive non-resistance. And yet you'll find Christians, particularly those of privilege, speaking of nonviolent resistance or nonviolent protest or the nonviolent fight for social justice, using the term nonviolence or even peace to signify absence of conflict or social turmoil. Like, you can fight that cause, but be quiet about it. That's just not accurate. And since we're still in Black History Month, let me remind you of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the heart of his letter from a Birmingham jail. Have you read it? Please read it. Even if a Christian of privilege desires systemic change, they typically want to see that change come about through passive means. When a struggle for justice erupts, they quickly critique protesters while remaining silent on the violence those protesters are standing up to, and violence that protectors of the system are exercising against them. There was tons of this during the Black Lives Matter protest, tons of it. Lots and lots of comfy Christians getting real critical about a broken window, missing the point entirely. So the response to hurt and injustice just gets boiled down to gutless passivity and acceptance, or my other favorite, thoughts and prayers. Now, if you want to know why we have interpreted Jesus' teachings about nonviolence this way, I have an answer, but I had to cut it for time, so come on Wednesday. I'm sorry, it's already a long sermon. So if you want to know why we've done this, come on out on Wednesday, 6 o'clock. Let's be honest. The normal or natural reaction to being slapped or sued or forced to carry a soldier's pack or gossiped about or maligned, the natural response is irritation, outrage, or even retaliation. Do unto others as they have done unto you. If you're not supposed to retaliate, and you're not supposed to just lie down and take it, what's the answer, Jesus? How do we do active nonviolent resistance? How do we love our enemies? Thankfully, Jesus was a teacher, so he gave us some examples. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. So hold out your hands in front of you. Now tuck away your left one. I'm watching you. Hold your hands out. Now tuck away the left one, because in Jesus' culture, the use of the left hand in interpersonal interactions was strictly forbidden. And you actually got fined sometimes. They were not messing around. Okay, now look back up at me, and you've got your right hand out. If you were to slap me on your right cheek, don't have too much fun with this. If you were to slap me on my right cheek, you would naturally do that how? That's right. Thank you, Angus, for being so quick to show how that would happen. Wow, did not prepare for that. It's not a trick question. You would backhand, right? This kind of blow to someone's face was a show of insult, from a superior to an inferior, master to slave, man to woman, adult to child, Roman to Jew, and it carried no penalty. Perfectly acceptable. But if you wanted to strike someone who was your equal, what would you do then? Well, you're not going to backhand them, because that came with an exorbitant fine. If you backhanded an equal, you would be fined 100 times more than you would be for common violence. Like, there was an expectation of honor and respect. So you would not backhand an equal. If you wanted to throw down with someone who was your equal, you had to make a fist or an open palm and strike their left side with your right hand. Minimal penalty, no social shame, other than maybe people thinking that you should get therapy instead of hitting people. Big feelings. Okay, so what did Jesus instruct us to do if someone backhands us? Try to humiliate us and dehumanize us? Well, a retaliatory blow would just escalate violence, and that is not Jesus' jam. Instead, Jesus told us to turn the other cheek, the left cheek. Now, if they're going to hit you again, they have two choices. If they're going to backhand you, they have to do it with their left hand, which you're not allowed to do. Or they have to use their right hand open, which signals that you are their equal. The first option, culturally not an option. The second would challenge your striker's supposed superiority. You took the power away from them. The aggressor has lost their power to dehumanize you. Now, if I've lost you all with lefts and rights, because I do, you should imagine, okay, me trying to write this part of the sermon, it was ridiculous. It was ridiculous. Find someone you love and trust, slowly act it out. You're gonna see what I'm getting at. Backhanded, humiliation. Open-handed, a strike between equals. For someone attacked in this way, turning the other cheek is non-violent resistance. No to what you're doing. I honor your humanity, and you're forced to honor mine. Checkmate. The next example, the one about tunic and the shirt, way less directionally challenging. There was no middle class in Jesus' day. There were haves and the very have-nots, and the empire really just padded this haves, and I guess things haven't changed. People ended up trapped in cycles of indebtedness just to survive. Again, not much has changed. Someone who had nothing to offer as collateral would literally have to hand over the shirt off their back to bloodthirsty creditors. Matthew says, if someone would sue you and take your tunic, let them have your cloak as well. And Luke writes, from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Well, many of the poor in Jesus' day had only 2 articles of clothing. And the law allowed a creditor to take either the outer or the inner garment from a poor person as a promise of future payment if they lacked means to pay a debt. It was legal, but it was gross and exploitative. So what does Jesus say? If someone calls on you for a debt that you simply cannot pay and sues the coat off you, well, hand them your tunic too, so that you're standing there stark naked. A manifestation of the perverse corruption of the lending system. And now before you go thinking, oh gosh, preacher, doesn't that humiliate the one in debt further? No, I say to you, in that culture, being exposed or naked was not shameful. It was looking upon nakedness that was worthy of shame. So can you imagine the chuckles from Jesus' audience that day? Jesus endorsing public nudity as a valid form of nonviolent protest or nonviolent resistance. If anyone would sue you for your coat, let them have your tunic too. Take back the power and expose this ridiculous and corrupt system. Jesus was clever, huh? Now, I've already run long, so I'm not going to cover the third example this morning. Come on Wednesday. But Jesus' point is this: in the face of hate, in the face of your enemy, in the face of even systemic evil or bigotry or violence, choose neither cowardly submission or violent reprisal. Find a new response, a third way, something fired in the crucible of love that promises to liberate the oppressed from evil as well as the oppressor from sin. A way that can secure your human dignity and begin to reverse the power imbalance. Do not let violence lead you to mirror your opponent. Don't become the thing that you hate. As Audre Lorde wrote, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. They may allow us temporarily to beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about real change. We can't keep doing that which we've always done. Let me be clear. Jesus is not advocating active nonviolence merely as a technique for outwitting the enemy. Rather, it is a just means of opposing the enemy in a way that holds open the possibility of the enemy becoming just also. Even our enemies still have worth and are redeemable. Even our enemies have worth and are redeemable. It doesn't mean we allow them to continue harming. We can stop the harm our enemies are doing, and we can do so in a way that calls them to face their actions. We can hope not only to liberate ourselves, but through active nonviolent resistance, to also invite them into grace and transformation and change, thus reclaiming the humanity of all people. With the two hands of nonviolence, we hold space for our enemies to make different choices when they choose. What good is replacing one hierarchy or hegemony with another? We're not trying to keep doing the same thing. Our goal is a shared table where our enemies, whether our enemies choose to change or not, that's their choice, that's between them and God. Nevertheless, there is a place at the table for them. It is easy to love the people you like. It is much harder to love the jerks, but I'm telling you to love the jerks, because there was a time when you were a jerk and someone loved you. And that someone has always been Jesus. And he's always setting a place at his table for you and for me and every other person in this world that God so loves. A great reversal is coming. It is already breaking in. Can you perceive it? And in this world, the now and the not yet, Jesus has shown us that there exists two kinds of people. Our neighbors, whom we are called to love, and our enemies, whom we are also called to love.